Welcome, Mr. Secretary. You are here in Oakland virtually at the California Ballroom. We're very glad that you managed to squeeze us into your busy schedule. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you very much. A very good morning. Can everybody hear me well? Can you hear me loud and clear? I hope so. Yeah, I'll get going if okay. Looks like everybody can hear me. An excellent morning, everybody. Wish I could really be there in Oakland in person, but there are two events going on in Sacramento today that are preventing me from making a trip.
Yeah.
Can you still hear me? Okay, good. I'm hearing
his stream.
Yeah, the people hosting the Zoom, they may want to go on mute because I'm hearing just a lot of people talking there, but that's why I just want to be sure. But I really wish I could be there this morning. I'm a big fan of a lot of the work that Cal Bikes has done over the years, and in particular, Dave Snyder. Dave, thank you for that warm introduction. I heard just a little bit of what you said in the beginning. I'm sure you were saying bad things about me on the tail end, but I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Dave, for your leadership within the organization, and thanks to everybody who was there as well. Heard a little bit of the comments from Mayor Schaaf. Appreciate her leadership and the things that she's done for the city of Oakland in the transportation space. And I know there's much more to do. And Ryan Russo as well. Sounds like Ryan is in the room. Haven't seen Ryan in a couple of years. But everybody in the room, thank you so much for being there in person. If possible, if my slides could come up, I'll try to get through this quickly so I can have a discussion. And I have a hard stop at 9. I need to get to the next event that I need to get to, and it starts at 9:30. So we'll get going here. So as Dave mentioned, for the last 2.5 years, I have been the director of Caltrans. It was a huge honor to get appointed by Governor Newsom to serve in that role. And while I was in that role, one of the things that I clearly wanted to do, I wanted to make a focus after a certain point in time of being there, was shifting the organization's focus from being one that is solely focused on infrastructure as the ultimate outcome to one that is centered, one that is fully focused on people, and people ask me very often internally within the department, as I talked about it, one of the largest or the second largest department in California state government with more than 22,000 people. People would come up to me and say, you keep talking about people focus. What does that mean? What does that mean and how do we get there? And I was able to, with the leadership team within the organization, come up with a bit of a framework of what that actually means for the department and for the people of the state. And if you go to the next slide. And what that means is that the ultimate outcome no longer becomes how quickly we can build a bridge. Things like, on time, on budget have always been a focus for DOTs. And I think that's important to be prudent with taxpayers' dollars. But at the end of the day, we are building the infrastructure, whether it be a highway or a paving project or sidewalk or bike lane, whatever it is, we're building that for people at the end of the day. So let's keep the end in mind. And the end is making the transportation network, the transportation system better for all people who use it, regardless of their physical ability, regardless of their gender, regardless of their race and economic background. Let's make it work for them. And so that's the what. What does that mean for people, and how? The how part is what you see on the screen. How do we get there is what people externally and internally begin to ask. And this is the how. And I can tell you the how, these foundational principles, they were not based on where the political wind was blowing at a particular moment in time. This is early 2020, before the pandemic, before George Floyd, before President Biden and Vice President Harris. This was becoming our foundation. So it wasn't based on any particular push from any direction, but listening to people in the community and really understanding the shift, the pivot that Caltrans needed to make. And I'll tell you that in my leadership role as secretary now, this will continue to be the flagship for transportation for the state. There may be some things added to this at some point in time, but this will continue to be a primary focus for us as a state. And so let me talk about these just very quickly, and then we'll try to get through the rest of the slides here. Number one, safety. I think it goes without saying. Organizations talk about it all the time. They say safety is our number one priority. Easier said than done. What does that actually mean? Well, part of the reason why this is the number one challenge is because California has more people down on its transportation system than any other state. More than 10 people a day down the transportation system of the state. And at least 3 of those 10, in many cases, are the most vulnerable users of the system. So people who are walking and biking are often the people that are getting killed. And with 3,600 people dying annually, there's no doubt it had to be a focus. And to do that, that meant funding, that meant policy, that meant clear actions on changing this. Now, this is not something that can happen overnight. We have a vision zero belief within the department across the state, but to get there, it's going to take a significant push. There were people who were not completely bought into this idea that we can get to zero. And what I repeatedly shared and showed people, and everybody in the room should know this, is that there are clear examples of people haven't, or communities, municipalities, haven't been able to drastically reduce their numbers across the world. The example I always like to use is England, a country, or the UK, a country of 56 million people. So roughly 40% more people live in the UK than we have in California. Their fatalities today, I think their numbers last year were roughly 1,500 of 56 million people, 1,500, where 40 million people were at over 3,700. So more than double their fatalities. Now, in 2005, their number in the UK was roughly 3,400 people. That's what the numbers were in the UK. So from 2005, 3,500 people were killed on the transportation system to today, 1,500. So more than 2,000, a reduction of more than 2,000 people. How did it happen? A shift in policy and funding. They didn't have a reduction in policy. They didn't lose the amount of people living in England. Even, they had positive growth of people in that period. The reason why they were able to do it, a shift in transportation policy, and it's largely centered around a safe system approach. We've now adopted that same policy. As I left Caltrans, it was one of the final documents that I signed within the department to make that shift, to move the focus from just the people who are using the system, to increase the amount of focus on making sure the network, the system itself, is safer, is one of the main tenets of that shift in policy. And I believe we can get there. Let me shift gears real quick to climate action. When it comes to climate action, goes without saying, this is one of the biggest challenges our state faces. Nearly 50% of the bad air quality in our state, the GHG in our state, comes from the transportation sector, more than any other state, I might add, and more than the national average, more than the global average. If you're wondering what the global number is, the global number is roughly 16% of GHG comes from the transportation sector. The national number is 29%. California, 50%. Reason why? Our huge and significant dependence on only driving single occupancy vehicles. That's the reason why. It's clear and simple, more than any other state. We have to change that. And the investments that are being made in ZEV and zero emission vehicles in the state, we're leading the nation, we're practically leading the world as well. They're important, they're good, but that can't be the sole focus. We have to diversify the transportation system of the state. continue to invest in transit, continue to invest in walking and biking opportunities. And again, that's going to continue to be the sole focus. I would add as well that land use is critically important. As you go back to your cities and municipalities where you live, continuing to lean on people who are in charge of land use, people who are in charge of zoning, to make sure that our development pattern is more supportive of a climate-friendly approach is something that needs to happen as well. And as far as equity goes as a priority, what needs to happen here is that we have to shift from a place of focusing on symbolic change to systemic change, from symbolic change to systemic change. Before in the early part of 2020, we came out with an equity statement, the first ever for Caltrans. And again, not just because of the political winds at the time, but we also came up with a framework of 4 Ps to guide our equity work. But again, this is one of the areas where I think in the past, we've focused so much attention. We've put a lot of attention on symbolic things. I think changing the name of public facilities, public highways, from names of individuals who've had a harmful past when it comes to issues around equity or racism. I think that's important. Those are noble ideas, but changing the name of a school to one that is more friendly to these issues, or name of a highway, is not going to change a life. Let's focus on changing lives. Building highways through communities that divided communities, that changed lives. That had some negative consequences on Asian, Latino, African-American communities. Let's reverse that today. And that's something that I'm gonna continue to make sure is on the forefront of all the transportation work in this state moving forward. Next slide. I'm gonna kind of clip through the rest of these quickly because I wanna get to questions. If there are any questions from the audience. Multimodalism, I've talked a little bit about this already, but I'm hoping that part of what can happen with our lexicon in the transportation space is that we not forget as well the health, the economic impact of becoming more multimodal in our approach to addressing transportation challenges in the state. Because one thing that I've realized since I've been here almost getting close to 3 years now, is how vast the state is, number one, but how different it is, that it's not a monolithic state by any means. And so we talk a lot about the environment in many places across the state, but there are some parts of the state where these issues, people struggle with understanding the importance of multimodalism, but they have that economic challenges and they have health challenges and challenges in many other areas that if we invest in multimodal transportation in those places, it can help their challenge areas. And so we have to continue to broaden out how we talk about this and the importance of this particular issue. So look forward to working with many of you in the room to continue to expand our approach in this area. Next slide. So to get there, to get to a place where we have more active transportation projects, more varying classes of bicycle facilities, more pedestrian facilities, and more investment in transit, in high-speed rail and buses, all the things that we want to see and we know will have the intended outcomes that we're hoping for. What's going to need to happen to have these projects is a clear investment, an investment strategy, a continued shift in policy within the varied departments at the state level and at the local level. And of course, we're seeing the federal support that is now happening as well with IIJA, with the federal infrastructure bill that passed. So the policy and the funding that we need to make this happen is going to continue to have to be the place that we focus. And I believe we're getting there. I can't recall the time as exciting as this one for transportation. I really just can't. And I've been in this space now for 20 years. And this is the most amount of momentum we've had to do the right thing for people in transportation. So let me just run through quickly some of the policies, some of the funding ideas, for funding approaches that are coming through right now that I believe are going to continue to transform what we do for active transportation and for bicycling in particular. Number one, the governor's budget proposal, 500 million additional money for active transportation is being proposed. 100 million specifically for bicycle and pedestrian safety to support the HSIP, program. The governor's also proposed as well. I was excited in partnering with him and his office to announce potentially 3 months of free transit. If you've not heard this is groundbreaking. No other state in the country has ever done this, but potentially 3 months of transit if his budget is able to move through. So a lot of additional funding for transit and bike ped or active transportation that I believe will rival the federal numbers. Quickly, some other things. The Caltrans active transportation plans are moving forward. It's one of the things that I heavily focused on when I was at Caltrans is our ability to be able to deliver these active transportation plans for all 12 districts. All of them are going to be completed. They're all going to be finalized this year. And 4 key criteria areas are safety, equity, mobility, and preservation for all 12 active transportation plans. And because the state is so vast, it's critically important that each one of those 12 districts have their own plan and has sort of their own outlook for what's needed in those areas. The switching gears, complete streets performance targets are now going to be a part of the SHSMP, the Strategic Highway Manual Plan. It's now going to have a complete streets focus and performance targets as a part of it. There's now a complete streets decision document. This one is really, really important. This is where, as projects are going through the development phase, the project delivery phase, where the project manager and ultimately the district director are going to have to sign off on why or why not, particularly why not a complete street feature was not added as a part of the transportation project. So that will have to be documented. It can no longer be just somebody in a room somewhere just making a decision and saying, oh no, we just don't want to do that. It has to be signed off on by leadership, the project manager, and the district director ultimately. So that's a key element that's now become a part of things at Caltrans. The DP 37, I'm sure many of you heard about this, director's policy for complete streets, one of the most progressive or aggressive, however you want to look at it, complete streets policies now in the country. I believe a heightened commitment. There was already a complete streets policy for Caltrans, but a more heightened commitment to complete streets within the department. Several other things that I could run through from a policy planning document standpoint, but I want to get through the rest of these slides just very, very quickly. Next slide. So I want to thank Dave and again, many of you at Cal Bikes for a lot of the support around us being able to adopt policies around walking and biking within the department. One of the shifts that we made very early on was one around the funding part again, where we tried to, and were successful at being able to get a $100 million reservation for active transportation as a part of the shop. It wasn't the easiest process to get done, but we were able to get it done. But we partnered with Cal Bikes after that reservation was added into the shop, that $100 million reservation. And let me tell you just quickly what came out of it. 34 total projects for that $100 million in all 12 Caltrans districts. What is that? What do those 34 projects look like? 13 separated bikeways, more than 50,000 feet of new sidewalk gap closures, 27 projects in underserved communities, 26 projects on Main Street locations, 2 traffic calming and road diet projects. When are they going to be done? The more important part. In 2021, 2 projects went to construction already last year. This year, 10 projects will go to construction. In 2023, an additional 4, and in 2024, 18 projects will go to construction. So moving forward, not just something that will sit on the shelf within the department and not come to fruition. So thank you for your partnership very much on that. Next slide. Reconnecting communities, and I'll go through these very, very, very quickly. I think an important part of our equity work moving forward is going to be how we identify how to bridge the gap that's been created by so many of the transportation projects or infrastructure that we built over the last 60 or 70 years. And again, we have $1 billion that's coming from the federal government to support this through IJA, through the latest transportation bill. But regardless of that, the governor is also committed specific dollars to support this. $150 million is being committed from the governor's budget to support this particular issue. I think it's one of the most important things that we can take on. And I look forward to seeing the fruits of this new venture, this new labor that we're taking on. We've already identified that the planning arm of Caltrans has already identified 69 different locations across the state where we could bridge the gap. Transportation should not be a divider. Transportation, we know, should be a uniter for our communities. And this is what this Reconnecting Communities program is going to do. And we're going to go after the federal money as well, the $1 billion that's been set up to make this program happen. Next slide. CAPTI and SB 743 are going to continue to be the overseeing, the sort of guide for all the work that we do in this space. There are documents like CTP 2050 that have also been put in place, and since I've been around in my brief tenure here. But there are statewide, other statewide guiding documents like CAPTI and SB 743 and now 285 that has recently passed that will also be critically important for our work moving forward. Next slide. I want to get to questions here. Clean California is also another big opportunity. Governor Newsom, this whole idea of revitalizing the public spaces of our state completely came from him. He reached out to me and said, how can we transform the public spaces in our state? And he came up with this idea of $1.1 billion investment to not only beautify the state, to make us, help us see the importance of our public spaces more, but to educate people about it and to employ people, give employment opportunity. And I'm thrilled at some of the outcome that we've already seen. More than 2,500 tractor trailer trucks of litter, 2,500 have been removed from the public spaces in our state. So a lot of amazing work that's happening in this space. Next slide. Finally, partnerships are going to be critically important for any success that we will continue to see in this area. I want to work, we want to work, CalSTA and its the departments has to continue to work with local government, with regional government, and in particular NGOs, many of you in the room, to get there, to get to the place that we need to get to. We've got a lot of work to do, but man, I can't think of a more exciting time than this one, where we have the policy and we have the funding to make the things happen that we've wanted to see for many years. So again, thank you for that partnership. It's going to continue to be a focus, and I look forward to what we're going to be able to achieve together in the weeks, months, and years to come. So with that, I know I went probably way longer than I should have, but thank you again for the invitation to the state transportation team. I would love to take a couple of questions very quickly before I run. Thank you very much. I can't hear if people are speaking on that end already, but I'll wait to hear any audio.
They just go now? Okay, so how do we get 2 billion for bikes right away?
2 billion for bikes. Look, you know, I think so. I actually think something like that is very plausible. I think we're laughing, but I think it's plausible. It's going to take time, but we will get there. I think the plans that I mentioned, the active transportation plans that I mentioned that the districts are doing, the work that local governments are doing to identify spaces, places for investment. I think it's showing up, and we can spend that money. I mean, there are facilities, there are major facilities, bridges in particular I can think of in Bay Area and even parts of Southern California where we could make an investment and take up $150 million to build major bike projects. I think we can get there. I don't think we're there right now. The governor is making unprecedented investment right now. I mean, an additional 500 million on top of the 500 million already in the ATP program that the CTC runs. So with the general fund in the position that it's in, I wouldn't rule it out for the future. Next question.
Is this on? I have two questions. First of all, how has the housing crisis impacted the speed at which you guys are looking at mobility options? Obviously, people that work in lower paying jobs or in the service industry have to live further from cities. That puts pressure for demand. So that's part one. And the second part, infrastructure is obviously number one because it's related to the number one issue for biking, which is safety. But in addition to that, we have the other key component for mode shift for bikes, and that's behavior change. And I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
I'm sorry, the last part of what you said, I heard you say safety and then you said, but it is also what?
So safety infrastructure is obviously number one for, in terms of encouraging people to use biking as a mode of transportation. But a second part of that is getting people that are non-riders to ride bikes. So in what way is the department thinking about or internalizing ideas around behavior change?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. I'll start with the latter. The former question, the earlier part of the question is that's a very long response. But with the latter question, I think you're spot on with the fact that if we're going to get mode shift in the state to the percentages and the numbers that we want, you're going to have some shift in mindset about what biking and walking opportunities really mean. I think one of the key things that needs to happen, and I mentioned this early on, is the land use. If we continue just to invest in the infrastructure, but people still feel people feel like they have to ride 5 miles or 10 miles. You got to think about the potential novice rider. If everything is so far away via bike or walking, it's not within sort of a 5 mile or 3 mile radius, something that's doable, that shift is going to continue to be hard. So, I mean, rarely are you going to see people who regularly ride 25 miles or 15 miles to work or to shopping. We have to continue to think about land use, but we also have to make the infrastructure clearly safer. I think we have to get beyond thinking, and I think we're there in California a little bit already. We have to get beyond thinking just paint is going to be enough to get people, regardless of where they are in their life, as far as ability and age, that paint alone is going to do it. Paint is not going to be able to do it. We have to build more protected facilities, especially on the state highway transportation network, because the volumes of traffic are heavier and the speeds are heavier. Making investments like that, and even off-system investments, trails. That's the way that I think you're going to be able to get people to get out more. And I believe the more you see people on the system, the more you get people out on the system. I think that alone in itself, I think, induces the interest and induces demand. When you go to Copenhagen and you go to London and all these other places that we rave about, I mean, there's so many people on the network. There's so many people. People don't even think about getting in a car. They're like, everybody else is doing it. It's a part of the culture. And by building safer facilities, building land use that is more is more connected and dense, and making the overall system connected to transit and varying other modes of transportation. That's how we get there. But we're not going to be able to get that 8 to 80 that we talk about all the time. 8-year-old to an 80-year-old. We're not going to be able to get them on the system if it's just a paint on a highway system and they got to ride 6 or 7 miles. Ain't going to happen. Not going to happen. It's got to be more than just paint. It's got to be safe. It's got to be protected. It's got to be connected. And I think we will start to see that shift. And it starts with us at the state and many of you at the local government level in the room. So very, very good question. The housing question I'm sorry, that's a longer question to answer, but I agree with the direction of the question that you were asking there. I'll take one more and then I really have to run. I need to be somewhere at 9:30. One more quick one.
Thank you for your service and good luck with your new position. You've done a great job for us so far. Very looking forward to it. I'm referring to a piece of legislation, AB 1946, which is the legislation is to ask Caltrans to develop some educational material to be on the web, specifically about e-bikes, electric bikes. We're experiencing a lot of issues related. It's sometimes a little bit outside the realm of Caltrans to put together an education project, but I hope when they do, because I suspect the legislation will pass, that they include information about how to use a regular old bicycle as well as an e-bike, because there's certainly plenty that people, especially new bikers, need to know about what a stop sign means, for instance. And I look forward to expanding that request from the legislature to include education for all ages about all ways to use even acoustic bikes, is what we're calling the bikes that don't have electric power. Excuse me, I didn't come up with the name, acoustic.
Yeah, well, I'm not familiar with 1946 yet. I'm sure my Ledge team, Deputy Secretary for Ledge, they'll get me up to speed on it at some point. I'll say I don't comment directly on pending legislation that is still going through the process. Don't necessarily take a position on it, but the tenets of this issue in general, as far as education on bikes and e-bikes, is something that I believe in. I think we have to continue to educate people about how to use e-bikes and what it could mean for transportation. Just like we're making the investments in ZEV for automobiles, we need to continue to expand our investments in e-bikes and educate people about them. I think it's a little bit broader than even just the Caltrans issue. There's the DMV that is now within the portfolio of departments that I engage, that I oversee, even a DMV and their responsibilities as it relates to the driver's manual. I think things like that can incorporate ideas around just more safer walking and biking. Maybe not necessarily e-bikes, but just the fact that we need to educate people about the varying modes in the state even more. So anyway, very, very good question. I look forward to getting up to speed on 1946, but I don't directly comment on pending legislation. Thanks for the question. Again, Dave, thanks to you and everybody at Cal Bikes for your leadership and leaning in on these issues every day, and the push that you've made in the state. Without you and your organizations, all of you there, California won't be where it is on this front. So I'm grateful, thankful for all the work that you're doing. So thanks a lot again for the invitation. Appreciate it.